top right, you want it in speaker view, not gallery, if you want the person speaking to show up.
It doesn't.
It's a bit different on an iPad to a laptop, isn't it?
Yeah, and I'm not.
Nick, are you looking at it on an iPad?
Yeah,
No,
on my
it's-
iPad I've got all 9 of you, but if I was using my phone, I'd only get 4 of you.
Right.
It's actually it's an Amazon Fire, which is conflict.
So you're using the wrong corporate giant.
Okay, just make everyone aware we are now live on YouTube. And Nick's pictures disappeared.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that.
Oh, we can hear you though.
Keith, I'm going to actually rejoin, if that's all right.
Okay,
Oh, I have rejoined.
you have
But I
rejoined.
can now see Brian. That's even better. I don't know how that has happened, but thank you for that. Maybe it's now working. I have pressed something that might have helped. So welcome, everyone.
Can anybody hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you, Howard.
Okay, because I've had to come in twice.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
So we have apologies from Andy and Maggie. Don Gerard has signalled that he is stepping down from the committee owing to the number of committees he is on. So we should thank him for his contribution over the years and note that we are now one shorter than we were. I'd like to welcome Claire, who is observer, and Lizzie, who is going to talk about item 4. It's quite a detailed agenda, so if we can be reasonably brisk, I'll attempt to do the same myself. And I'll begin with declarations of interest to say, in my own case, that it's been pointed out to me that in the minutes of the last meeting, records me of saying that I had a non-pecuniary interest as supporter and member of this men's shed. It appears possible that that interest is a pecuniary interest, and I'm going to consult the monitoring officer on that. But in the meantime, I'm going to declare a pecuniary interest as a supporter and member of this men's shed for this meeting. And Roger is kindly going to chair that item, and I will remain mute. I'd also like to declare a non-pecuniary interest as a trustee of the Newman Collard Playing Fields Trust. Roger, would you like to go next?
In what sense?
You need to say the normal, I am Councillor Roger Hargreaves.
Yeah, I see. Sorry. Right. Yes. Sorry. I don't. Have I got the wording in front of me?
Shall I go first, Nick, and then everybody can just follow my wording?
Please, you go first. Nick.
Okay, I'm Councillor Keith Budden. I'm a member of this parish council. I've read the agenda and I have no interest to declare in any of the items under discussion this evening.
Roger?
Right. I am Roger Hargreaves. I'm a member of Lisp Parish Council. I have read the agenda and papers, and I have no pecuniary interest in any of the items.
Howard?
I'm Howard Lindsley. I'm a member of Lisp Parish Council. I have read the agenda and I have a non-pecuniary interest as a trustee of Newman Collard Playing Fields.
Do we need to get declarations for people who are non-voting members? Sarah?
No,
No.
I don't believe we do.
Okay.
I think we do actually. I think
Do
the non-voting members come under the same category as councillors.
if there's any doubt, it's probably safer to do it than not.
Probably safer to do it, I suppose. Yeah, okay.
Okay. Brian?
My name is Brian Mayo. I'm a co-opted member to this committee. I have a pecuniary interest in this men's shed, and I am a trustee at Newman Collard Playing Fields.
David?
I am David Dodds. I have read the agenda. I'm a member of the public co-opted to the Facilities Committee.
Thank you. Claire, I should have asked you.
I'm Claire Williams, a councillor of List Parish Council, and I'm not a member of this committee, so I will not be having any voting rights, and I'm just here as an observer.
Thank you. Sarah, do I need to do you and Lizzie?
No.
You just need to say that they're here, who they are.
Sarah and Lizzie are here. Great. Just so that we are aware that the exciting agenda that we had initially has been extended. It was evident electronically, but not on the printed version. So there is an item on grounds maintenance that we'll take as item 12 at the end of the meeting. As regards the minutes of the last meeting, does anyone have any corrections to make? May I take it that we are happy that it's an accurate record?
Agreed.
Would someone propose that we accept them as an accurate record?
I will.
And second?
I'll second if you want.
Thank you. So I think in terms of matters arising, having looked through them, I think we're going to cover everything on the agenda, apart from 23F20 on the top of page 2, where I said I would undertake to carry out site visits. I have done a first round of site visits, guided by David Dodds, for which I'm extremely grateful. I now know a bit more than I did as chair at the last meeting. I don't think there are any other matters arising that don't come up on the agenda unless anyone has anything that they have spotted.
Can I ask, I'm not sure whether it's going to come up or not, in 27F20, it was agreed to pursue the course of the service level agreement with Newman Collard. I was just wondering what progress have we made on that, but if it comes up sometime, I'm happy to wait until then.
The issue of the service level agreement in relation to the groundsman's hut will come up as item 8. Was it that you meant, or the SLA with the trust?
I'm talking about the SLA with the trust.
Chairman, I comment on that.
Yes, if you'd like to do that now, that would be great, Roger. Thank you.
Simply to say that we have agreed with Dorothy Collard that we will deal with the agreement over the groundsman's hut first, and we will not start further discussion on the SLA on grounds maintenance until that is done and dusted. It's just too much trying to do everything at once.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Howard. So let us move on to the first major item, which is the allotment tenancy agreement. And Lizzie, would you be good enough to just paint the background to this and really draw our attention to the sort of key things you think we should focus on, please?
Absolutely. So the new tenancy agreement really has been, it was initiated by me because when I started with working for the council, I was kind of thrown at the deep end with the allotments, and it's a huge amount of work year in, year out. So my proposal to Sarah was to create a rolling tenancy agreement, and whilst we were moving to a rolling agreement, to actually incorporate kind of more safeguards to prevent against our plots not being worked. And actually it's been quite prudent, because with COVID we've now got a fair waiting list for our allotments, and so this tenancy agreement hopefully will iron out any issues, and actually it includes a few legislative requirements that we didn't have in our previous one. So it's kind of yeah. But I did put this all in the cover letter. I'm not sure if you've taken a look, but the main areas, if you've got the document in front of you, so in clause 1, clause 1 in the rent under 1.1, we're asking for direct bank payments rather than we have a load of people bringing in money, checks, but we had quite a large problem with that because with COVID, I don't really think we should be handling money. So obviously there will be a few tenants who, you know, probably some of our older parishioners who want to continue, you know, using checks, and on those few occasions I'm happy for that, but I think it makes sense to move to cashless. So we're now saying rent's due from the 1st of January, which just makes sense as that being the deadline, because actually it's a rolling year tenancy agreement. We're saying we're going to be sending out an annual notice of rent rather than previous. We would send out the tenancy agreement along with any increases in the amount it pays, whereas if it's going into a rolling, the annual notice of rent will be when they're issued with, if we do decide to increase tenancy rents. 1.5 and 1.6, that's standard legal clauses included, which you really should, tenancy agreement. And we didn't put about pro rata payments previously, 1.7, but I've just a kind of, we've removed any doubt there. So if someone comes in halfway through the year, they'll have to pay 6 months rather than full year.
Can I pause you there, Lizzie? I think we should do this section by section. The key thing, which we all have spotted, is that this is going to be a new system, which will be much less labour intensive for the office. And I think you've been talking in your discussions and recent inspection that you've done with a number of the tenants, and at the moment we're getting a favourable reaction. But would any members like to ask anything about the overall proposition before we move on?
So we're talking about the whole document now?
No, we're just talking about the issue of having an agreement which they sign and then is rolled over annually in terms of being required to do the direct debit.
Hello, can I speak?
Please.
Okay, you asked for a comment on item number 1, which is the rent, and I would like to say I wholeheartedly support all of this. The thought of 140 people popping into the office in a week to pay their rent is extremely manpower intensive, and I think the idea of going to electronic transfer is a really good one. And we can make accommodations for those who are not familiar with that facility, and I think the overall benefit to the council will be immeasurable. That's my personal view.
Thank you, David. Any other comments?
Yeah, I mean, I would fully support what David has just said. I think it just makes a lot of sense anyway, but especially in the current climate with COVID, it makes even more sense if we can have 5 people coming into the office in the course of a week rather than 150. That's got to make a lot of sense, I think.
Anyone concerned about this change of approach? I think I'd just like to have recorded our thanks to Lizzie for taking this initiative with David's support. And I think it'd be great to reduce the administrative burden on the office. As it happens, it's very timely with the COVID problems that we currently face. What I suggest we do now is move on to rapidly go through the other key changes which Lizzie has listed in the covering paper, and ask people if they have problems with them, rather than sort of expressing support for them, if there are issues that they're concerned about, to raise those. So if we go on to clause 3, tenants' circumstances, Lizzie, do you want to just introduce that?
Yeah, I think the main changes here are, we always had a kind of informal understanding that households wouldn't have more than 2 allotments, but there are a couple. We have a couple of people who have, I've actually seen they've got 3 allotments, and I've got another tenant who wants a 3rd one. So actually, in period of high demand, which we really are, it's now written rather than it being an informal. And also I've put the tenants shall reside no more than, it was tenants shall reside no more than 1 mile outside the parish of Liss. Whereas I'm now saying, you know, to be a tenant, you have to reside within the Liss parish, because from my understanding, we actually subsidise the allotments. So why should our parishioners be subsidising someone who doesn't live in and pay precepts?
And we've got a waiting list of about 16 at the moment, haven't we?
Yeah, it's about that.
I mean, I do support this, and I think Lizzie's already taken some action to serve enforcement notices on 11 tenants who her recent inspection show haven't been tending their plots. My only thought about it, and it also relates to a point later on, is that it might be good in terms of our community engagement commitment to send this in draft to the tenants and give them a short period of time to make any comments. Not that we would necessarily accept any arguments against these sort of changes, but so that they have the right to make representations before we formally put this out and ask them to sign it. I don't know if that would, others would support that, but you may have other concerns you want to raise.
Chairman.
Brian.
Can I make a point, Lizzie? In section 3.1, could you include reside within the parish of Liss?
Let me have a look, sorry.
And I think your 3.2 is slightly confusing the way it's phrased. Can I suggest you revisit 3.2?
Can do, yeah.
Thank you.
Chairman.
Yes,
Chairman,
indeed. Roger?
Right. 2 things. One, I would support actually a very brief consultation with tenants. I think it's quite important that we get a view, even if we may not wish to change, but we certainly need to hear it. But secondly, can I disagree with removing people who live 1 mile outside the parish? It seems to me that there are people who live outside the parish, but nevertheless do look to Liss for providing its services, because they tend to live in the very rural areas just outside the parish, very often in parishes which I don't think provide comparable services. And it seems to me that a little mean of us to suddenly withdraw allowing people within a mile to apply for tenancies.
Any alternative views on that?
Personally, I would tend to go with Lizzie's viewpoint.
I think where I would say, Roger, is that if we do this period of consultation, and there are these people who you've suggested might lose out, they could tell us, and we can consider that.
David's trying to say something.
Yeah.
David?
I think somehow we need to acknowledge some form of flexibility with this. Over a period of time, we've gone through a waiting list into umpteen vacant plots unworked, and somehow this is how we've got to, there are more than 2 plots allocated to 1 household. because in times when no one wants an allotment and someone is willing to pay us to work an allotment alongside annual tenants meeting that says we are fed up with unworked plots against us, with all of their weeds coming onto our plot, it's always a difficult thing to balance what is right. And somehow what is right is what's right for the times. And what's right for the time is the public demand and what everybody wants from us. So somehow or other, these need to be a form of guidelines rather than necessarily set in concrete from now until infinity, I think. We just need maybe the assistant clerk who manages the allotment some sort of latitude that says when we can't actually give away an allotment for love nor money, then maybe we could relax the rules that particular year. I don't know. But if you have a rigid rule 100% of the time, or 100% of the circumstances, it's never going to fit all of the time.
So we could say that prospective and current tenants must normally reside within the parish of List, and that List residents will normally be entitled to no more than 2 allotment plots.
Yeah.
Now, I would support that because, you know, in my mind, I've got things around Prince's Bridge where we've got about at least half a dozen allotments haven't been used for years. So why would we preclude somebody who lives more than a mile outside the village from working that plot? It doesn't seem sensible to me.
Would everyone be happy with my suggested change of wording?
Yeah, I think inserting the word normally would make sense. Howard?
Mr. Chairman, taking 3.1, I'm quite happy whether it's a mile outside the village or in the village or whatever. But I think there might be a situation where somebody has had an allotment off perhaps for several years and has worked it, moves house to a location which is slightly outside of the parish or the parish plus 1 mile. And I think it's a bit harsh if they automatically lose their plot at that stage. So I would like to say, to add on the end, something along the lines of at the time they hire the plot.
Chairman, could I come back?
Indeed.
I will withdraw my previous point on the basis that I think the use of the word normally gives flexibility. I would disagree with Howard, though, about trying to put in additional words. It's simply easiest if you just have the word normally. That it enables you then to have whatever the required flexibility is. If you try and caveat that in various ways, you get yourself into all sorts of problems.
I'll accept that.
Okay, well, I think unless anyone's got any further burning issues, we should move on. And I think the next thing that Lizzie has pointed out, whether the change is to do with the code of conduct. Anything you need to tell us about that? Clause 4?
It's an expansion, and this is more to preempt, as we, you have a lot of conflicting views, and allotments seem to be a hotbed of gossip and intrigue, and so I feel it really, it's you hear all the gossip. You want to know what's going on in List, go around an allotment. So it's more just to ensure that not that there has been an issue so far, but just in case any future issues, it's clear.
Yeah, I think it's a good idea.
Great, thank you. Let's move on to cultivation. I have previously intervened earlier today to say I think that 5.1 is a bit too firm to say that they should cultivate their allotments solely, not least because at the time of COVID, when if people don't have gardens, actually going and sitting in your allotment, it would be good for people's health and well-being. So I've suggested to Lizzie that we substitute the word primarily to produce fruit, vegetables, etc., rather than solely. I don't know what people feel about that. Otherwise, any other concerns or comments?
Chairman, do I understand you're saying an allotment could be used for a recreational purpose then?
I'm saying that people could sit on a chair and enjoy it.
At the expense of not cultivating the ground?
No, it's still, if you look at 5.3, there is still the requirement for it to be cultivated.
Yeah. So you're not voiding that? You're not voiding that?
No, not at all. It's just 5.1. It implies that, doing anything else in the allotment, would be banned, which I thought was a bit too hard.
Yeah, that's fair enough. Howard wants to come in.
Yes, I agree with that. I think that's a good point, and there may be other similar ones. So I think put the word primary in, and that would solve it all.
Can I just come?
We've lost you, Sarah. We've lost you.
Sorry, the reason that clause came about, I believe, was more to cover the domestic angle. The point was that you can't produce vegetables and so on to sell for profit. That's the background of that clause. So you have to be careful that you don't allow any room for somebody to sell part of the produce they produce. The idea is they're not allowed to sell any of the produce. So we might have to reword that just to make sure that that's clear. I think we're now addressing 2 points within that.
Could we then say instead, cultivation of allotments must solely be to produce? So it's the act of cultivation which is solely to produce for domestic consumption.
David wants to come in.
David?
Can I just say, later on in the agenda, we have got an item called a community allotment. If we have a community allotment, it won't necessarily be for domestic consumptions for themselves or their families. So we just need
their own specific. We can do a specific agreement for the community allotment.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm happy.
We could all
draft something. Sorry, Sarah, we can't hear you.
You keep being
sorry,
muted.
I'm double tapping. I think we could just remove for themselves and or family and just keep it as domestic consumption as opposed to commercial is what we mean. Just domestic.
Yeah.
People are quite welcome to grow it and give away their produce if they get extra. The point is we don't want commercial, so it could just leave it as domestic consumption.
Yeah, I think I just misread it when I first looked at it today, as implying that you could only cultivate and do nothing else on your allotment. I slightly prefer my proposal say cultivation of allotments should be solely to produce. So it's the act of cultivation that we're talking about.
Yeah.
Can we move on from cultivation?
Can I just make a point, Chairman? You may think it's somewhat obtuse, rather, but there's no reference to any cultivation of recreational use plants.
What do you mean by recreational use?
Well, some people grow under lights in their lofts.
Oh, yeah, but that's illegal. So, I mean, it's kind of...
Yeah, but we don't seem to have any reference anywhere to such.
I don't think, it's illegal to grow, I don't know what we...
Well, if it's for
marijuana. So
medicinal use, maybe not, but, we live in an age where these things sort of...
I have to say, I haven't
gain an awareness.
Allotment tenancy agreement that I have read.
Yes.
I suppose it's people didn't feel the need.
Point to ponder anyway.
I think we'll just ponder it and see what happens.
Ponder, yeah. Ponder that.
Drugs.
Yeah. Can I just check? I'm not sure whether I understand what we're now changing to in that thing about producing 5.1 about producing fruit, vegetables and things.
That has
What I've suggested, Howard, is cultivation of allotment plots should solely be to produce fruit, vegetables and flowers for domestic consumption.
Okay, so you're going to exclude somebody who wants to go and sit in a deck chair on his allotment?
No, we've gone through that point, and it isn't about the totality of what they do in the allotment. It's about the Cultivation Act, the act of cultivating.
Okay. Okay, right, yeah, thank you.
But I do think Sarah's point about removing for themselves or family, domestic consumption can take place after they've been sold. So I think we probably ought to keep that in.
I think there's sometimes a situation where people swap produce with a neighbour or something like that.
Well, perhaps we should say for domestic consumption, not for
sale.
commercial purposes.
Yeah.
And leave out the themselves or the family.
I put not for financial gain.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Can we go on to boundaries and paths? You say it's for health and safety as well as aesthetic reasons. And could you just enlarge on that?
Sorry, I need to go back
Lizzie.
to barbed wire. Is that what?
Well, it was just your guidance to us in your covering note says added for health and safety as well as aesthetic reasons.
Well,
I just thought,
wire.
Okay.
The allotments.
That's the actual only change, the addition of barbed wire. The rest of it is as it was before.
Yeah.
Okay, with everyone?
Yeah.
Shall we just note the point about clause 7? When we can't ban chickens and rabbits, and if there are someone who wants to keep bees, the wording will cover that eventuality, as in one case. Moving on, I think, to a slightly more contentious area, which is water. Lizzie is proposing that we ban the use of hoses. And that was my second reason for wanting to have a period of consultation, because there might be people who are physically unable to carry water in their watering cans, or for horticultural reasons feel it essential to use hoses. And so that was my sort of thought on the subject. What do others think?
I think I agree with you, Chairman. I have a slight reservation here, but I think I'd go with banning the use, but see what reaction we get to that wording.
David, do you have any wisdom on this that you'd like to share?
Well, I think when you've got a water meter on these allotment sites, you leave yourself wide open to allow hoses and sprinklers. And the bill will potentially rise and rise.
But people are using hoses at the moment, aren't they?
Well,
the allotment.
This says they shall not use hoses or sprinklers.
Well, yeah. It's the latest. It wasn't on the previous tenancy agreement, but we have, if you look at our allotment environmental policy, it talks about limiting our use of resources on our site and talking about water conservation on the allotments, and this would enable us to kind of live up to that policy. I read somewhere that using a hose for an hour uses the same amount of water a family of 4 would use in one day.
There are issues potentially with the hose trailing across other people's allotment plots.
Yeah.
And also with hogging the tap when you've got many other users on the site who also want access to water.
So can we agree that we will include this requirement not to use hoses or sprinklers and just see what the comments are in response to the consultation?
Yeah, I think so.
Chairman, do bear in mind, not all sites have got pipe water anyway.
No.
Yeah, I realise that.
Riverside, Princess Walk, not certainly Fernhills has got one tap. I'm
Yeah.
not sure about Mitchell's even.
Yeah.
There's a tap at Mitchell's.
There's
There-
a tap, yeah.
Yeah, there is a tap
Okay.
at Mitchell's. I think
So should we do that?
Yeah.
Anyone disagree?
Oh, no, that's great.
Equally on the environment, does anyone have a problem with these propositions? Infrastructure, anyone got any problems?
I didn't know. I'm just on infrastructure. Was just a comment, really. I didn't realise we allowed ponds. I'm not quite sure why we'd want to allow ponds.
It's more. We've got a couple of we've got a couple of plots which do have ponds on them.
Oh, okay.
It's part of ensuring that we are kind of. It's an environmental policy, really.
Mm.
Doing our bit for nature. It's a way of encouraging, kind of wildlife, and yeah, I see no wrong with it. It's
Okay.
after their site.
Flexible, friendly approach.
Yeah.
Can we move on to termination? I questioned whether we had to give as much as 12 months notice to quit. But apparently, Lizzie tells me that is a legal requirement.
Yes, but as it says, they're permitted by the Allotment Act 1950. That's our legal requirement.
It's nice to be governed by such up-to-date legislation.
Some of it goes back to 1908, so
So
That would be in the case of a breach. If a breach occurs, there are measures in place.
Yeah.
This is if LPC wanted to sell the land and
Yeah.
terminate all the plots agreements.
so where does it say that we can terminate through non-use?
12
Yep.
Comes under enforcement, I believe.
Yeah, wouldn't it come under enforcement? Yeah, 13.2.
13.2.
We may want to add something about termination, may be terminated by giving 12 months notice, except in the case of a breach. See section 13.
I think that would be a
Yeah, it might be
helpful
good. Yeah.
clarification, particularly as Lizzie is just about to terminate or has terminated a number of allotment holders.
Oh, they're fighting back, to be honest. I've had very long emotional conversations, quite a few tenants over the last few days. So yeah, they were phoning over the weekend as well.
Have they seen this then?
Pardon?
Have tenants had sight of this?
Sorry, I didn't hear that.
Have tenants had sight of this document?
Not this document. No, I've been sending enforcement notifications.
Oh, I see. All right.
Just to add, I agree. I think it's very important to show that we could take enforcement action without waiting for 12 months.
Mm.
I
Yeah.
agree. Yeah.
So Lizzie, I look forward, no doubt, to hearing of people who continuing to disagree with you, appealing to me, no doubt. I think the important thing is to keep emphasizing that they are excluding other people from improving their own health and well-being and enjoyment of this community asset. So keep emphasizing about others rather than about their woes and excuses.
No.
David wants to come in.
Lizzie, are we taking a targeted approach to this? When you say we have waiting lists, we don't have a waiting list for every single allotment, do we?
Oh, look, I'm being probably more rigid with the sites where there is, you know, I am being more targeted.
Well, I think that's a good thing. Why should you carry on paying for a plot you're not using when there is a waiting list for that particular plot? I think that's quite justifiable. However, we must have the flexibility that says if there's no waiting list, you're going to carry on paying us money. Why should we walk away from that?
No, look, I absolutely agree, but councils need to realise that for a 100-metre square plot, we currently charge £20. And that's such a small amount that people will pay that year in, year out, and maybe never visit their allotment plot for years. So we do have plots which haven't been worked for years, and it's a nuisance for neighbours.
Lizzie, I think David is agreeing with you.
Yeah.
Do you think we should include a formal appeals process?
No.
No.
The appeal.
I'm glad you think that.
Howard.
Yes, I'm in agreement with all of this as written, apart from the 14 days. People often go on an annual holiday for 14 days, and if this arrives just as they're leaving, they won't get it until their time has expired, so to speak. And I wonder if that 14 days should be 21 or even 28 days.
No, I don't agree, Howard, because if you look at it, you get 3 notices. So it's not you only get 14 days, you get 42 days effectively. You get 14 days, then if you don't do anything, you get another 14 days, and if you don't do anything, you get another 14 days. So I think 42 days is 6 weeks. If they're not going to do anything in 6 weeks, they're not going to do anything.
Okay, accept that.
And the compensation, the final item, is as required of us, so there's no real need to debate, I don't think. So does that mean we are now able to resolve to adopt this as a draft tenancy agreement, subject to a short period of consultation and some detailed amendments that we've discussed at the meeting? Would someone like to propose that?
I will.
Is that Howard?
Yeah.
I'll second it.
Thank you, Roger. Thank you very much, Lizzie. And I think it's tremendous that you're being so proactive and also having to handle all the responses.
Well done, Lizzie. Well done.
Well done, Lizzie.
Yeah. Unless you want to stay and enjoy the rest of the agenda, have a nice rest of your evening.
I think Sarah mentioned you're talking about the village hall next, so I might just hang around for that, but I probably will leave after.
You've got to sort out the office first.
It's very noble, but it also enables me to formally thank you for an enormous amount of work you've put into risk assessment against a background of ever-changing government guidance. So, Sarah, are you going to speak to this item unmuted?
Yeah, I'll start, but Lizzie may want to come in because, as you say, Lizzie's the one that's done all the good work on this. But by way of summary, yes, we've completed the risk assessments, which have been very thorough, which have enabled us to reopen the pavilion and the village hall. The take up of the users we had previously is more limited, as some aren't happy to come back. As regards the office, we had intended to reopen about now, but unfortunately with the guidance changing again, we have all been recommended to continue working from home, which is a shame really, but we think it's working quite well. We don't think the level of service we've been offering has been affected in any way. So Lizzie, do you want to add anything on the opening of the village hall and pavilion? Maybe a few words about how many users we've got back.
Yeah, okay, so we opened last Monday. We have let me just, can I just get my spreadsheet up? Sorry, I've still got finance in front of me. We aren't as busy as we were. We don't, we have a few hirers, regular hirers who haven't returned, and what we don't have are the kind of the big money hirers. So they were the children's parties, the adult evening parties. We had a wedding reception booked in for was it October? Yeah, October or November, and wedding receptions have gone from 30 people to 15, so they've cancelled, and that was going to be a £450 booking. So that's really, we still have the RVS in the village hall. They've been paying a kind of monthly fee, but really it's just the grant that they were given in order to hire it out. So it's, you know, scouts have been paying, but apart from that, it really is just, I think we've probably got about 3 or 4 hours of hire during the week for each venue, which is, you know, far below what we'd normally have at this time.
Lizzie,
Thanks, Lizzie.
could I just ask, or Sarah, the latest guidance about the rule of 6 talks about the fact that support groups of up to 15 participants may continue to meet, and they define that as formally organised groups to provide mutual aid, therapy, or any other form of support. I just whether, you know, do you think there could be any groups that are currently excluding themselves that might actually be squeezed in within that definition?
Most of the support groups we have are for people who are more vulnerable to COVID. As a result, they have no interest in returning at the moment. I mean, if you look at the numbers of infections per day, we are right back to where we were before lockdown. It's the same level. So, you know, people are still concerned, and I can't see. The exercise classes are coming back. Pretty much no one else. But you know, you look at the exercise classes, they are, you know, it's a bunch of fit, you know, younger people. So yeah, I can't see anyone else really wanting to come up at the moment. In fact, I'm just almost weekly we're getting more and more people emailing me and cancelling. So the latest one was the NCT, which, you know, which is totally understandable. So that's a National Childcare Trust, and it's, you know, pregnant women and their babies. Yeah.
Do any members of the committee want to raise anything, or can we just note this unhappy situation? Let's note this unhappy situation. Thank you again, Lizzie. Sarah, we have a long list of ongoing actions. How do you think we should deal with this, bearing in mind that we're 50 minutes into the meeting?
I don't think we need to go through all of them. If anyone wants to raise anything or ask any questions, I'm happy to respond. It's definitely worth noting that the village hall toilet project has been completed. Just a shame not so many people are getting to use the new facility, but that's quite an achievement to get that project finalised. There's nothing else in particular I want to pick out. So if anyone's got any questions. Actually, one thing, Mill Road Community Garden, it might be useful.
Yeah, I was going to say, can I just give an update on Mill Road Community Garden? We are making progress. We now have, or almost have, I should say. We have a draft heads of agreement, which we're just having a couple of meetings to finalise out from EHDC's perspective. But the feel at the moment is that EHDC are happy to give us a license over all of the land within the area that we marked out for the park. The thought is that it will be on a 2-year rolling license. So, you know, it was a bit like the allotment agreement we've just been talking about, but it'd be 2 years. It would just roll over, providing everybody keeps to the terms. as soon as we sign the agreement, or as soon as practically after that as they can, East Hants will instruct North to stop cutting the grass on that area until we've finished doing whatever we want to do with it, by way of putting the play equipment and so on onto it. After which we need to decide what we want to do with regards to maintenance, because North are happy to continue maintaining it, but then obviously the East Hants will want us to pay North for that bit rather than them. Or we can get our groundsman to cut it, or we can get Peaceful Town Council to cut it, or whoever we want to cut it. The only thing which legally we will need to do is we will need to nominally pay £1 for the license, but I mean, I don't see that being a problem. And they would also want to see a minuted decision of full council that A, we wanted to go ahead with it, and B, that we recognised in that going ahead with it that we would have a liability for the maintenance, whether we did that ourselves or whether we paid North or Peaceful Town Council to do it.
David, do you want to add anything?
So this is a license to use.
Yes.
Initially, they gave us 3 options for us to make a choice. Does those 3 options no longer exist? We only have this one?
We only have one, yeah.
Okay. But I think the only thing I would flag is that ongoing there will be a budgetary implication to this decision, should we take it, because it will increase the amount of land that we have to maintain through whatever means. So yeah, potentially there will be an increase to the precept on grounds maintenance. So I've
Just done a quick calculation. It's about £6,000. It will be about £6,000 in my calculation for the grass cutting for 1 year.
Oh, do you think so?
Similar to Newman Collard.
I would equate this to about the same size as Liss Forest in terms of acreage.
Well, if I can
Anyway.
say, if I can say, North have given a figure for maintaining it if we were to use them.
Yeah.
Which I'm not going to disclose now orally because I'm conscious this is going out on YouTube and it's a commercial figure. But I will forward it around to everybody. But it is much less than Sarah's figure, so say, put it that way.
Okay. Suffice to say, then, I think that Council and certainly Facilities Committee need to be aware of the increase in grounds maintenance associated with us taking on this lease, and whatever source of grounds maintenance we choose, that needs to at some point feature in the budget. That's all I'm really saying.
Yeah.
But just to pick up the point of principle, what's effectively happening is the community is going to benefit, but so is the district council by effectively shifting the cost of this maintenance from themselves to us. So there's a benefit within the district which they're going to get for less money.
Well, in that case, one could argue that we should ask for a £10,000 contribution for the next 10 years maintenance, because it is indeed a release of finance for EHDC. They are reducing their cost and passing it on to us. Maybe we should ask for a financial incentive for that.
I think this is a slightly difficult discussion for Keith to respond to, given his important role within the district council. So I'll perhaps invite other members to say whether you think we should contest this, given that there were 2 other options.
Chairman, I wouldn't use the word contest, but I do think there are reasons for a very good discussion about the basis on which responsibility for the land is transferred to us, and to what extent that involves costs being transferred from EHDC to ourselves. I certainly wouldn't roll over and just accept what's been given, but I think the word contest is possibly a little confrontational.
Sarah, just for the minutes, actually, I think I should probably play safe and declare an interest at this point, because of my position on East Towns. I hadn't thought of it before it came up, but I think I should declare an interest. It's not a pecuniary interest, but it's an interest. Howard?
Yes, I agree. I think we ought to look at some sort of dowry or something from East Hants, or them to carry on doing cutting or whatever. There's a second point as well. If I understand it, we're talking about a 2-year rolling lease or licensing agreement. Yeah. The problem we have there is if we were to then decide to put some play equipment on there, and then the next day East Hants gave us 2 years notice, we would effectively have to write that equipment off over 2 years, and I don't think that would be good economics from the parish council's point of view. And you know, the district council might suddenly get an offer from somebody to buy the land from them. So I think there's a concern there about us having equipment that's only going to last 2 years.
David?
Keith, if my memory serves me correctly, back at some point in the past, didn't you declare this piece of land as national, some sort of area of national, local importance to us? Therefore, EHDC couldn't sell it to a developer.
It can't be sold to a developer, no.
Right, so it can't be sold to a developer. But Howard's right, at the end of the 2 years, we could indeed lose the lease. Lizzie, my recollection is we never really intended to install play equipment here. This was really a community garden rather than a play area.
So it's a community garden with some natural play features. So we, in the grant that Sarah managed to get, rather than the Pocket Park grant, it was, sorry, I can't remember the name of the grant, Sarah.
It's from EHDC Section 106 funds.
106,
they are giving the money for this to be developed.
And there are, we are adding play features. It's not in the traditional, you know, play park sense, but it's meant to be a space for all of the community. So there will be something for our younger members, but more kind of like I said, natural play features. They're going to be benches, you know, to socialize on. We're planning a wildflower meadow, but it will be all from that Section 106 money. It will. I think we got 10,000, wasn't it, Sarah?
19.
19.
Sorry, yeah.
19. Okay, I think, Howard, the risk to LPC, I think, is rather minimal, because we will fund the development through 106 money authorised by EHDC. It will not be invested in the traditional play equipment. It will indeed be a community garden. And as Keith has advised, it cannot be sold off to a developer. So if they were to refuse us after 2 years, they wouldn't renew the lease to us. Their options for this piece of land, it seems to me, somewhat limited. You can't sell it off, and we've already got a community garden that's by that time being established. It seems to me that would be the sole use for it. I don't think the risk to us is particularly great.
Chairman, without going to any of these details, it does seem to me that we're throwing up a number of issues that do need to be discussed with the HDC, on which there needs to be clarification. So I think for tonight, I would have thought it was sufficient. We're basically saying, yes, let's continue a dialogue with the HDC, but make sure these issues are picked up, and then we get a report back on them.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I mean, the next stage, as I see it, is that we will get a written version of this heads of agreement, and once we have that and circulated, and I think then is when we can really discuss it. And yeah, I think we probably will need to have a dialogue with EHCC.
Let's leave it at that then.
Howard?
Yeah, could I just make the point that some years ago, we were persuaded by EHCC that a bit of land on the Inwood Road estate would be as a long-term aim, and the long-term was in capital black letters, and got the parish council to agree that in the long term it could be developed, but it really was the long term. And next week, as soon as we'd agreed it, next week's Petersfield Post said that the East Hampshire put it up for sale. So I don't think we should trust East Hants. We need to be a bit more worldly wise than that.
Well, I think we could take your comments into account when we look at the heads of agreement and go back to them for the clarifications that Roger has suggested. I think we should move on because there's a lot more to deal with in the next 27 minutes. But we will have an opportunity to look at this again when we have the heads of agreement.
I'm going to say good night to you all.
Good night.
Okay, no, Lizzie.
Good night. Chairman, are you dealing with item 6 on block?
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you, Brian.
Are you dealing with item 6 on block?
Yes, I've asked for
So
any
in that case,
issues that people.
could I ask regarding 05/20, the signage for the pavilion, which we have discussed, and I was more or less under the impression that that was something we were going to proceed with, yet here it seems to be thrown in doubt.
Chairman, can I second that? I was going to come in on exactly the same point. I'm
Yeah.
not at all happy with the wording of reconsider. As far as
I thought we'd agreed that a post with a hanging sign would be appropriate. I think the only thing we hadn't decided how to come as to whether or not it would be illuminated.
I think there were two issues. One was whether we were happy with the design that was offered to us at a reasonable price.
Yeah.
And people felt it was too rustic. And the second was that to have it illuminated would be costly. And Sarah and I took a view that possibly now that the pavilion is well known, the issue was not as pressing. But I'm happy to take views from committee members as to whether this should be a priority for future expenditure. I don't feel strongly about it myself.
Can I come back on that, Chairman? Because I don't actually agree that the pavilion is as well known as you imply.
Agreed.
Judging by my neighbours, having tried and describe to them where the pavilion is, and they say, "Oh, that's the pavilion, is it?" I think there's a need for signing. Indeed, I think there's a need for signage elsewhere in the village to actually point you in the direction of the pavilion. Having said all that, I wouldn't give it priority just at the moment. We've got since it's not being used too much and we've got other things happening. I'm not too bothered if we don't pursue it immediately, but I don't want it lost.
So would committee members be happy if we revise that to say that it remains a priority but not an urgent priority, and Sarah and I will bring back alternative proposals to the original sign that had been offered to us, taking into account that our proposals need to include signposting from key points in the village.
I would like that.
Yeah.
Can I just raise one point that was an action for me, which is under allotments, the community allotment. I was to identify who had come up with this idea. Brian kindly pointed me towards him, a chap called Jeff Davis. I contacted him and he said, yeah, I think it's a really good idea that I had. And here are some particular thoughts, but I'm leaving the parish. So I won't be able to be involved further. David and I are going to take his thoughts. David has kindly agreed to lead on this, and in fullness of time, we'll come back with some proposition for the committee to consider. Is that a fair summary, David?
I think so. Timing comes into all of this. I think that one would normally start to work the land over the winter period in time for spring planting and so on. And I think we need to think about how we advertise, if you like, the fact that we are prepared to donate some allotments as a community allotment, whether we need to put it on Facebook, Twitter or whatever. But we do need to advertise the fact that we are up for this particular facility, but we do need somebody of a serious mind to take it all on.
I think it would be a good thing to engage the community to see whether there would be people who would be interested in doing it. Though it's not the best time for a gang of people to be doing things together, given the COVID situation. But it's outside, and it may well be possible to proceed during the winter if we can find someone. Could I suggest, in the view of time, that you agree that David and I should pursue this issue?
Agreed.
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 Any other points about Sarah's update paper?
Yes, can I just raise one under 05F20, the pavilion screening? I just wanted to make the point that this almost came into being in March this year, but we were thwarted with the COVID and coronavirus and everything else, and it never actually happened. So I would urge that we do think about this, because we need to think about planting this particular screening for the local residents. It's gone on a long time now.
Yep.
I realise the pavilion has been used, but I do think we need to make some preparatory and plant the pitches for them, as we agreed.
I agree.
Okay.
Can you leave it with Sarah and me?
It's on my to-do list.
Very good.
Okay, let's move on to item 7, reinstatement of the Tank Court in Liss Forest. This is something where we've made a number of commitments over time to Liss Forest Residents Association. Sarah has identified some funding for which there is no other evident alternative use at the moment. She's confirmed with Chris Patterson at the National Park Authority that this would be, in his view, eligible under the environmental funds heading. It seemed a bit surprising to me, but he's keen for us to spend this money, and this is an opportunity to fulfill our commitment to the Residents Association. Does anyone have any problems with this proposal?
I only had one question, Nick, which was, given the value of it, do we need more than one quote?
Indeed. Sarah, what do you think?
Come in.
Brian?
No, Howard wants to come in.
Yeah. I'm just saying, right at the bottom of the front page, last but one paragraph, formal approach we made to Temple Inn Red Mist Leisure for funding. Has there been any conversation with them, and is it likely we'll get money from them?
So could we deal with these points one by one? The issue of alternative quotes, Sarah?
To start with, the first set of figures I got from Jim Bean, who's the local resident spearheading this. The first set of figures were informal figures, which I understood the petanque players to be contributing by way of labour. This more formal quote came through more recently. So if they are to use an external company, it's quite legitimate that we could seek an alternative, ask them to seek an alternative quotation.
I think given the amount
that's something I can go back. It could be agreed subject to further quotations.
It certainly was something I'd noted myself to ask. I think probably that is the right thing we should do if everyone's agreeable.
Chairman, could I come in and say that over the course of time, and as you'll probably be aware, my involvement goes over many years, there have been issues and discussions on the matter of drainage at Liss Forest Recreation Ground. All may seem well at the moment, considering the highly dry summer we've just experienced. It is an issue, and it will continue to be an issue. And I know this quotation allows for drainage pipes, but I have been involved in previous surveys here. And can I tell you, the issue of drainage is on that side, the east side, down to the wooded area. And if you take that rectangular, if you like, that is the worst area and the area prone most likely to flooding. I fully endorse the idea of a tank core at this site, but not in that position. So
now we have 3 issues. Can we agree that we're going to require them to ask for alternative quotes? Yeah.
I agree that, but I do feel the question of the drainage needs to be examined.
Indeed, Brian. Can I take
and possible location? Yeah.
Brian, if I could take Howard, he was next on the list. I don't think we have approached the temple, have we, Sarah, at this stage?
No, we haven't approached the temple at this stage. It had been mentioned that they may be willing, but no formal approach has been made. So
I think what I would say on that is I've had dialogue with the relevant senior manager of Red Mist about usage of the temple, and I'd be happy to resume my dialogue with him to see whether we might be able to elicit a contribution.
If I can just come in on that as well, Nick, because when the temple was closed by Fuller's, and then we formed a group, or Liss Forest formed a group, but I was part of it as from Liss Forest Council, about finding a tenant, and it was at that which we were very clear that Red Mist were by far the best choice. Even at that very early stage, they did recognise that they would need to make a contribution towards relocating the petanque court. So I think the principle is there, but yeah, I don't think it's ever been discussed how much, but the principle was there.
Sarah, could I ask you to at least note that either in the minutes or just note it so we don't forget it when we approach them?
Nick?
So, sorry, David, is it on a different point?
Possibly.
So can we take Brian's point then about drainage?
Can I just say that when the Residents Association came forward with this, as I recall, the siting was adjacent to the substation. They never ever asked for this position.
Could I ask you, Brian, if you'd be willing to help advise us and them so that we do get the right location? It would be a great pity to invest this money and find it's waterlogged.
Yeah.
Rather than try and pin down tonight where the best place would be.
Yeah. Okay.
That would be very helpful. David.
Just a point to make on the this estimate that we've got. It seems to me there's an awful lot of labour costs here at £2,500, and I just wonder whether we can call upon the Residents Association to, I don't know, maybe muscle up some muscle.
David, leave it with me. I know the main parties involved with this. Let me have a chat with them.
That's a very helpful suggestion as well. Thank you, Brian.
All right.
While you're advising us, do you think that needing the fence is an essential part of this? Because I see it's costed around 1,500 quid.
I think personally I feel it's necessary because of potential dog fouling.
Right. Yeah. Okay, that's a good answer. Thank you. Can we move on from petanque? Do we need a resolution to support this in principle? that we make this application? I think we probably do. So I will move. I will propose that. Would anyone second?
I will.
Thank you, Howard. Let's move on to the groundsman's hut, and I shall withdraw from the meeting and invite Roger to chair this.
Thank you, Nick. I am happy to chair this item, although I have to say I don't understand the reasons why, because in my view, many councillors are members of all sorts of organisations within the parish, and they pay subscriptions to some of those organisations, and I can't believe that each time, therefore, there's a pecuniary interest involved. But perhaps more particularly, can I actually point out this item is not about the shed, it is about the agreement with the trust. And that actually is the focus of this discussion. Be that as may, I will not pursue it any further, but I just wish to express my reservations that I'm not sure taking the chair is a necessary act. Anyway, just to say where we are, as you know, we have been in discussion on an agreement about the use of the groundsman's hut on a shared basis with the men's shed. Those discussions have been with the trust, although we also had a three-way meeting with the trust and the men's shed just to make sure that we were all sharing the same view of things. And since then, we have been pursuing a license with the trust, which would give us space within the groundsman's hut for the groundsman, use of shared space within the hut. It would also give us, describe details of access to that. The provision of a garage, which has been provided the trust, but will continue to be owned by the trust, and provision of a fuel store, and also general rights that we would have for access to the compound and shed and garage across Newman Collard land. And what we are looking to do is complete a license with the trust which describes those. A draft license has been drawn up with Sarah meeting with Dorothy Collard to go through that. We have a first draft. It clearly needs some amendments on detailed points, but I think the broad thrust of what we're trying to achieve here is in full agreement with the trust, and indeed their agreement that they will have with the men's shed will, I think, match what we are discussing with the trust. We had hoped that we would have a draft of the license which we could share for this meeting. That's not proved possible, and indeed the project is determined less by any timing over our agreement and the problems that the men's shed are having over getting planning permission, which they're doing effectively their behalf, but also ours for our use of part of the shed as well. So what will happen is that we hope over the next few days we will come to an agreement on a final draft of the license with the trust, and they will have their own processes to go through in terms of approval on their side. But what we envisage here is that we will bring a draft to the members of the Facilities Committee. We may have to do it by a special meeting by Zoom. We'll see how we go on that. And then eventually it will go to full council for approval. And we will need to try and do that really as soon as we can now. But I think we're very close to that position. Sarah, you're the one who's been actually pursuing the negotiations with Dorothy. Do you have anything you wish to add?
No, I haven't been able to speak with Dorothy at the end of last week, but I will try again tomorrow, see if we can iron out the last remaining details. I'm hoping it won't be too lengthy or too difficult.
So if you're comfortable with that, Chairman, I may have to come back to you and ask for a special Zoom meeting for a single item meeting of the Facilities Committee in order for the members to approve the licence.
I've now unmuted myself to say I would be happy if members of the committee are happy. Yep.
Yep.
Thank you very much. Sarah, Village Hall maintenance. I think we should just clarify that we've already agreed in the committee to the urgent items, to fund the urgent items. So I think this is primarily about the proposed 2-year programme. Having said that, there's a slight complication in that we also had invited Andy and Claire to look at a slightly more radical approach to refurbishing the village hall, perhaps taking it back to former glories to some extent. Sarah and I have discussed this, and we think the proposed budget allocation, if we were to go for something more ambitious, we would need to be looking for funding from elsewhere to achieve that, and therefore to have this provision set aside with council's approval would either be to do what's been recommended in the report or to contribute to a more radical refurbishment, if that's what Andy and Claire come forward with. Any concerns or suggestions about the 2-year programme?
Personally, if I may say, Chairman, I think as modest, you probably need a 3-year programme.
I think at the moment what we want to do is to make a case for the budgetary provision. Sarah, have I got that all right, or have I got some things wrong?
No, that's right. Some of the immediate works are likely to come in above £5,000. That's the works of the roof, external joinery and decoration. And so we are likely to have to take the quotes to council to agree that expenditure anyway as above 5,000. So I'm hoping to have 3 quotes shortly. So that may be able to go to October council. But essentially the two-year work programme was purely reflecting the recommendations within the structural survey. That's why it's only 2 years. So we've gone through and picked out all the recommendations for the first year and the second year and translated that into some kind of budget figure. Obviously, that is quite timely and it's for discussion on item 11, obviously closely linked with this item.
I think my Mediterranean hurricane is catching up with me. I can't quite focus on whether we need a resolution here. Could you advise?
I don't think we need a resolution for this item. It's more just to note the priority order for the remedial works and the proposed programme. The budgetary figures will be agreed under item 11, but I don't think we need a resolution at this stage unless Roger or Keith disagree. It's just
Chairman, I don't disagree with that, but it does seem to me we've touched upon the fact that we're talking about a 2-year programme for some of the immediate maintenance needs of the village hall. But I do think we have got to the point where we need to start thinking a longer term in terms of what the village hall is all about and what we want to use it for. That probably isn't a quick answer, and as has been implied, it may need external funding because I think it will be difficult for us to take that on. So I see this as a two-part thing. One is the immediate maintenance programme, and I think it's sensible to look at, say, something like 2 years or so. But secondly, I do think we do need to do some thinking about the longer term.
Indeed.
Chairman, could I just sort of make a... No, it's me actually.
David wants to come in.
Can I just make a suggestion? With the work that Claire and Andy will be encompassing, maybe the vehicle might, for their suggestion, might be the project review committee that says if we need external or other funding other than the budget, we should look to the SIL and maybe future LPC applications to the SDNP for SIL money, or indeed council's own SIL money, when that eventually comes through with the Anglo-Sash development.
Chairman, could I come in?
Indeed, Brian.
Previously, when I was hunting around for money for the pavilion, I had dialogue with Kevin Sawyers at Action Hampshire. Have you been in dialogue with him, Sarah? Action Hampshire.
I have once in the past.
You know Kevin?
Nothing recent.
Okay, well, Kevin is not that friendly towards parish councils, I have to say that. He's more in favour of voluntary organisations. But during one of my conversations with him, representing a parish council, he did say at that particular time there was a fund, and he had knowledge of a fund that would be appropriate in this situation they were talking about. Whether the fund is still there, whether we get anything from it, I don't know. But if you contact Kevin Sawyers at Action Hampshire, he may be able to point you in the direction of the specific fund he was talking about, which I must admit, as it was over 3 years ago now, I can't recall the name of it. But he may be able to give you a pointer as to what the fund is or was. It would be useful in this situation.
Brian, would it be,
I think we need to work out some idea of what we actually want to achieve first, and then I will go out and look for the
But
funding.
there was a fund that would be useful in this situation. Yeah.
can we come back to you, Brian, if we need your help to jog his memory? But I think probably we should work out first what we want to do.
Yeah, as I say, he's not a great fan of parish councils. He's more in favour of non-statutories.
Okay, so let's move on to the next item, which is the issue of budget provision. And this won't be a detailed discussion. There is more work to be done here, but Sarah was going to draw our attention to some of the key things that will need to be discussed in Finance Committee.
Nick, before we move on, under item 10, I've got this quote here for the damage to the pavilion zinc.
Yeah, we've missed that one.
Right. Thank you. Sorry, my attention is wavering a bit. Yes, this is to do with damage that appears, from what Sarah can gather, possibly to have been done deliberately. Would you describe it as flashing, Sarah? Do you want to just explain it?
You're mute, Sarah.
It's a bit like a windowsill to stop the rain getting into the bricks, I believe. I could be wrong.
What Sarah and I have discussed is she has had a quote. We've discussed seeing whether we can persuade our insurance company to cover this. But I think I probably need with Sarah to go and have a look at it. It's obviously a bit worrying. So we think what may have happened is that somebody thought what is zinc was actually lead, and then tried pricing it off and realized it wasn't going to be valuable. But I don't think there's anything particularly I can invite the committee to say, except that we'll try to avoid the parish council having to spend money on it if we can persuade the insurance company to cover it.
Check the CCTV.
Unfortunately, we don't know when the damage occurred.
Oh, okay.
So we really have no lead on when it happened, probably other than a month. And so it wouldn't be possible, and the footage may have already been written over anyway, because it only lasts so long.
Okay.
I asked the same, David, this afternoon, and we reflected on the fact that we probably would have spotted it sooner if the pavilion was being more regularly used.
Yeah, true.
Can we take it forward on that basis that we'll see if we can get it covered by the insurance company?
Yeah.
Thank you. So let's go on then to budget provision. Sarah, would you?
Chairman, do you want to call for an extension?
Are we committed to 1.5 hours?
No, we're fine until 9.
Yeah,
Or
that's
up to
what I was-
nine? Okay.
So that's the threat, but hopefully we won't need till 9. So Sarah, would you like to tell us what these items are?
Yes, we had a budget discussion today with regards to facilities, and the outcome is that Nick and I will look through all the different budget areas and consider more closely. But the headline areas that I'm going to flag up are things that have come to my mind as being key areas that are extraordinary items that we need to consider for the budget. The first one being the village hall maintenance programme, which we've already discussed, for which I think we need about £20,000 at least. The second area is maintenance costs arising from the Mill Road Community Garden, which we've already also touched upon. The third area is the cost of a programme to manage the Himalayan balsam, which has been discovered on the Riverside Walk. We have a quote for a 3-year treatment programme. Thankfully, it's not too large, and I think that's mainly because we are piggybacking on the EHDC management programme, because they've got it in their part of Riverside Walk as well. And the fourth thing to mention is that we, I've taken decision to not recontract the cleaners for the pavilion, because using our caretaker to undertake the cleaning is a lot more flexible and going to be cheaper. But of course, that's going to affect the budget in terms of the cost will move from contractor cost to staffing costs. So those are the few areas that I've come up with so far, which have got to be considered for the budget. But Nick and I do need to go through in more detail, and we will look back at the pattern of expenditure as to whether we've been over in the various different areas, or whether there's anything else extraordinary that's come up that needs to be taken into account for the next year.
Could I make a suggestion that if we're going to need to have an extra meeting to look at the license with the Newman Collard Trust, if Sarah and I have managed to do this work before then, that we might add this as an item so that the committee can be have a proper opportunity to consider what Sarah has said and any other items that we come up with.
Yeah, makes sense.
Chairman, can I just mention in passing, the project review group has a job of looking slightly further ahead, if you like, for projects that we may undertake, many of which I think these days will actually be externally funded if they do go ahead. But as I've said in an email to Claire, I'm anxious that these are seen alongside our budget, because they may well have longer term costs, maintenance and other costs, running costs and so on, associated with them. So I'm not clear whether there's anything that will actually affect the budget for 21-22, but just so that you are aware, there are other possibilities around which where the upfront cost may not come directly within the budget, but it may be something we just need to consider on the ongoing costs, or in some cases setup costs. And some of these could be things which would normally come under facilities, is the point I'm making.
Indeed. So shall we just note that item and come back to the committee as soon as we can manage? I'm conscious of the amount of work that is currently facing both Sarah and Lizzie, and indeed Liz. I think
Sarah, forgive me for stating the obvious, but next year we were going into our 3rd season of grass cutting, and we haven't actually had a price increase. You may want to consider that they may levy a price increase for next year, being the 3rd season.
Yeah, okay, I can go back and check the prices for next year as part of the review. Yeah.
Okay, we're now on to item 12, grounds maintenance. Sarah, would you just like to tell us what the key points are?
Yes, I sent an email today with a few points that need to be considered for grounds maintenance, but I'll just run through them. There's a couple extras as well. Right. If whoever's phone's ringing, please mute themselves. Okay. So the first item under grounds maintenance is we've had feedback about dog fouling in Centenary Gardens. As you know, we do have dog poo bag dispensers across the various recreation grounds, but we don't have one in the Centenary Gardens. So the first proposal is that we install a further dog poo bag dispenser for the cost of £79 in the Centenary Gardens to help reduce dog fouling.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Yep.
The second area is we've had a request for a memorial bench in memory of one of the original founders of the tennis club. I've met with the lady, and she selected a site where she would like the bench ideally, and it's on the LPC piece of land that's situated next to the pond and in front of Old School Road, if members know where I'm talking about. So if you're looking at the pond with your back to the Newman Collard Pavilion, it's the area just to the left. We don't currently have any benches in there, and so the agreement is well, the request is for a bench to be placed there at no cost to LPC, other than a small amount of possible labour from Paul to fix it, but the individual concerned would pay for the bench. So that's the second area. If members have got any comments. Most of the memorial benches have been placed in the gardens, the Centenary Gardens before, but it's probably quite nice to spread them out a bit further, because we've got 3 that are being fixed up to go back into Centenary Gardens. So is everybody happy?
Yeah,
I agree.
Yes, yes.
Let's go on to the dreaded Himalayan balsam then.
Himalayan balsam. Yeah, this was reported to me by the estates manager at EHDC, because they found Himalayan balsam and realised it was on our land as well. On the plus side, we are able to piggyback on the survey they've had undertaken, so there's no cost to us of having a survey, and it also means we are going to benefit from a much reduced cost, because we're a much smaller part of a bigger project. I think we account for about 8 or 9% of it, but we would be billed directly. The cost of the programme is 1,368, but the programme is 3 years, and we can pay in the year in which that work falls. So for the works in 22 and 23, we can budget in advance, but the first year in 21, the work needs to be done before the start of the new financial year. So I think we need to go to council to ask for the funds, £1,040 to be released from reserves at the October council. That's something doesn't need to be agreed now, but it is something that maybe Nick, as chair of facilities, could put to the October council meeting.
I would just observe that, given the horrors of this particular invasive plant, the sooner we spend the money, probably the better. Otherwise, we'll incur greater costs longer term.
Yeah, unfortunately, because the money would have to come from general reserves, it is actually a council decision.
Yes, indeed. So that's what.
So it's only 3 weeks away.
I will bring a proposal, as you suggest. So then there's the issue of the tree work, I think, isn't there?
Muted.
You're muted, Sarah.
Sorry. The next item is work required to trees. We have a tree warden who has submitted a report saying he's discovered five items that need attention. And Piccadilly, who we used most recently, have noted another 3 areas 3 trees that require works doing other works they've undertaken for us. I've run those via the tree warden, and he also agrees they need doing. So we have 8 different items of tree work that require attention. And we have a proposal, a quote on the table for just, I think it was 1,600.
1845.
1845, that's right. And that
Yeah.
that will be undertaken by Piccadilly, who have been doing some of the work for us recently. We do have funds in the budget. There was a £5,000, 5,000 was put into the budget for this year, and we've got 3,500 remaining. So it would still be within budget.
Any problems with that? My experience of paying for trees on my garden suggests it's not an unreasonable price.
No, I think we should go ahead.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Go for it.
Okay.
Go.
Yeah.
Agreed.
I think we've reached the end, which you'll all be glad to note. Can I thank you all very much for your contributions? I'm so glad that I came back to have a meeting of the Facilities Committee, because it's got me back in the swing. Thank you very much.
Sarah?
Yeah.
Sarah?
Sorry, one last thing. There's one extra thing under grounds maintenance. We have a quote for a new base for the trailer. The base of the trailer's gone. It needs replacing, and we have a quote for £500, which we do have some funds remaining in the plant replacement budget, which is sufficient to cover that.
Excuse
So
me,
our members
is that
happy.
a new base or a replacement trailer?
A replacement base for the trailer, and it would be I think it's steel. Supply and fit 6mm aluminium tread plate trailer bed.
Seems a lot
The
of money.
trailer's out of action at the moment.
It seems a lot of money in relation to the cost of a trailer.
But Brian, it's replacing a plywood base with a steel base. So I think it's a long-term repair.
Oh, you mean it's the bed of the trailer, not the frame?
Yes,
No.
the bed.
The bed.
The
The
bed.
bed's
not the frame.
rotted.
Oh, you said the base, you see. To me, the base is the frame with the wheels.
Oh,
And the
No, no, no,
no,
no.
bed.
The-
It's
bed.
bed.
Okay, that's fair enough. Yeah, okay.
Are we all agreed on that?
Yeah.
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 I can't repeat my goodbyes. I think we should all
Say
leave the
again, Nick.
meeting.
Sorry, can't hear you. What's he saying?
Don't you dare, Nick. Good to see you. Goodbye.
Good. Cheerio.
Bye.
Right.
See you all. Bye.